Back again with another video, the Game of the Year video. I do these every year, my top 10 games of the year. So this is going to be my top 10 games of 2016. And I'm not going to make this intro too long, but after the list of 10, I'm basically going to talk about games I missed during the year that I would have liked to have played, and that I thought that would have been like really good, and I would have really enjoyed. Some games that other people really love that I just wasn't able to get into, and then some honorable mentions for the top 10. So yeah, let's just get right into it with number 10. At number 10 is Kirby Planet Robobot, and I feel like this game was actually overlooked this year. Not a lot of people actually played it, and that happens to a lot of Kirby games, I find. This is the first one I've played in actually a long time. I didn't play Triple Deluxe, which came out last year, I think. And this game was awesome. It was a really enjoyable game. I put quite a bit of time into it. I even did a lot of the optional content in it. I really like what they brought to the series, like with the mechs, where basically you get like these ride armors that you could copy enemy abilities like Kirby could. There's some really like over-the-top bosses in this game as well. This game almost feels like a Platinum game at times, with like how like action-packed it is and how like crazy the bosses are in terms of like scale. The plot I thought was kind of enjoyable as well. It has a great sense of humor like all Kirby games. It looks great, like it's got some of the best use of 3D I've seen on the system. And it was just a really enjoyable game from start to finish. All the puzzles were really well designed. It even had a decent challenge level to it for a Kirby game, a series that's always known for being like pretty damn easy. But yeah, a nice surprise, and a game that I wish more people actually played this year. I think it's definitely worth playing. Definitely one of the more enjoyable experiences I've had this year. At number 9 is Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. A lot to say about this one. I did a review on the channel though. A really enjoyable JRPG. The battle system is a ton of fun in this game. Super fast paced. A lot of like different aspects to it. You know, the story and like the overall cheesiness of like the pop idol stuff that's going on wasn't to my taste really. But as far as gameplay goes, I mean, this is, I think, one of the best JRPGs of the year. And again, another game that a lot of people didn't get to play because it was on the Wii U, and only on the Wii U. And I think this is going to be one of those cult classics a few years from now, basically after the Wii U is completely dead and people start collecting for it again. I think this is going to be one of those top titles because you're not going to be able to play this anywhere else unless they do like a version for it for like Nintendo Switch or something like that. But this is one of my favorite games Atlas has put out. I really enjoy it, mostly due to the gameplay, but there were some really good dungeons in this game as well. The soundtrack was pretty good. It was probably a disappointing game to some people with how not like dark it is, and basically there's actually not a whole lot of Fire Emblem to it, and it's just, you know, super over the top and cheesy and crazy. Not probably what people expected when you cross Shin Megami Tensei and Fire Emblem, but I think the game nevertheless came out pretty well, and I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely one of the best JRPGs of the year, I think. And at number 8 is Titanfall 2, a big surprise for me. And first-person shooter campaigns in general have been pretty good this year, surprisingly good. It's a genre that I used to love. I used to love first-person shooters, but I don't like where the genre has gone as far as like trends go. Now, the multiplayer I didn't put much time into. It's just not my thing. Competitive multiplayer is not really my bag. But the single-player campaign in Titanfall 2 is actually incredible. It's really good. What strikes me the most about it is how creative it is in terms of its level design and the different ways you interact with the environments. The way that your pilot moves, for instance, is fantastic. The general feel of the game is phenomenal. It's got a great sense of speed to it. The wall running is fantastic. The platforming is really well done, and how that kind of ties in with the level design. The mech action is really entertaining as well, and I love how it's kind of mixed with the pilot stuff. And the story is actually surprisingly not too bad, or I should say really the characters and kind of like the relationship between your pilot character and then BT, who's kind of like this mech who you're kind of partnered with throughout the game. I thought that stuff was actually pretty well done. So it's a very short campaign. It doesn't last very long, but it's some of the most fun I've had playing a first-person shooter in years. It really surprised me. So yeah, Titanfall 2, a surprise entry on my top 10. And at number 7 is Severed, and this is probably the most overlooked game of the year, in my opinion. Nobody played this game, and I don't really understand it. It's weird. I think it's because it originally came out on the Vita only, and it's an indie title, like a downloadable only indie title, done by the guys that did Guacamelee, which was like a well-loved game. Everyone seemed to like that, to play that, but they haven't. A lot of people didn't touch this game. It's now on the 3DS and the Wii U, so I don't think there's a good excuse to skip it unless it just doesn't look like your thing. But this game is incredibly creative. There's nothing else like it. It's basically a first-person dungeon crawler adventure game mixed with like hack and slash combat. A lot of people compare it to like Fruit Ninja on like the mobile devices, but it's way far deeper than that. It's actually the combat. It is actually very intense and quite challenging. There's RPG elements as well. You kind of upgrade your character. And the way the combat kind of builds throughout the game with all the different enemies and bosses is really creative. And the game's atmosphere is fantastic as well. There's like this really subdued but at the same time fantastic soundtrack always going on in the background. There's some interesting puzzles for you to solve. This game kept me engrossed for like its 8-hour runtime, and I thought it was really well done. It's definitely my favorite game from the developers at Drinkbox Studios, a Toronto-based developer actually. And it works super well on the Vita, and it's actually also on iOS and I think Android as well now. And it's the type of game that I think could still work well on that and still be a lot of fun. Like, it's got a lot of depth to it, a lot more than you would think. So yeah, I really love this game, and I definitely wish more people gave it more of a chance. Definitely one of the more memorable experiences for me of the year, and I really wasn't expecting much from this game. I just knew it always looked interesting when I saw it at E3 and things like that, and that I wanted to give it a chance when it came out, and I'm glad I did, because yeah, it's one of my favorite games of the year. And at number 6 on the list, another surprise for me this year, a game I wasn't expecting to like all that much at all until I heard really good reviews for it and I decided to give it a chance, and that's Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth. Now, I know nothing about Digimon. I watched the show for a little bit when I was a kid and I collected a few of the cards for a brief period of time, but I really didn't get into it like a lot of people. And I was surprised at how much I enjoyed that game enjoyed this game despite that. The turn-based battle system here is a lot of fun, and the way you evolve your Digimon in this game is actually really creative and interesting compared to a lot of like monster raising RPGs. It's far more in-depth than something like Pokemon, and I got really addicted to this game. I couldn't put it down. So it kind of mixes, like that turn-based battle system with like this futuristic kind of vibe, and like the kind of hacking vibe that it's got. It reminds me of Persona a lot. With its setting and just the general mood of the game and a lot of the character designs, it's I don't know, it really hooked me with its overall like kind of atmosphere that it had, and the battle system and just raising your Digimon was just a ton of fun. A lot of depth to it. The game was far more challenging than say a Pokemon game, so I appreciated that as well. And I actually ended up doing a lot of the optional content. I didn't just finish the game and move on. Like a lot of games, I stuck with it, and this is like a 60-hour game. It takes a while to finish, but I was pretty much never bored with it. The story is even actually surprisingly good. It takes a long time to get going, but the ending of this game is actually quite strong. So yeah, the soundtrack is actually really good in this game as well, so that surprised me. Yeah, another game that just came out of nowhere for me, and I was kind of shocked how much I enjoyed it. And at number 5 is Fire Emblem Conquest. Another kind of surprise for me this year. This is the year I went from hating Fire Emblem to really enjoying it. I'm a fan of the series now, and Conquest is a big part of it. Awakening was the first game I got into, and basically Conquest came out not long after. It was a part of. There's basically 3 different games: Birthright, Conquest, and then Revelation. Now, it is disappointing in a lot of ways where playing all 3 is actually not recommended. It's an easy way to burn yourself out on the series, really, and the games in general, and it's just not a satisfying conclusion. Honestly, and this is why I've actually stuck Fire Emblem Conquest on here and not, like, Fire Emblem Fates as a whole. Now, I know a lot of people were disappointed with these games, especially in terms of, like, its story and writing. And it is maybe a backward step from, say, Awakening, but I didn't think that game was all that strong with its story or characters, so it wasn't a big deal to me that it was actually fairly lackluster here. And Conquest, I actually still liked it, though. I thought it was really entertaining in how over-the-top it was with its villains. The main villain in Fire Emblem Conquest is just ridiculous. And I thought it was funny, and the game kept me engaged because it was just so over-the-top and entertaining. Whereas Fire Emblem Birthright was just kind of dull. But the characters in this game, I still like the cast of characters quite a bit in these 3 games. And I liked spending all this time with them. And then the gameplay is just phenomenal, in Conquest especially, and that's why it's making the list here, because it's got a lot of varied objectives with the different maps. Birthright, it's just the same objective over and over again, so it gets old. But with Conquest, it's very challenging. It keeps you on your toes with all the different objectives and different well-designed maps that you'll come across. So yeah, if you have to pick a Fire Emblem Fates game to play, I would definitely recommend Conquest. And I'm sure the hardcore fans will definitely prefer this game to the others as well. I prefer the characters in Conquest as well compared to the other 2 games. But yeah, this is pretty high on the list just because, like Fire Emblem, I'm super into it now. And this game, I couldn't put it down. When I first started it, I just blazed through it. And the gameplay is just so much fun. It's definitely one of the best strategy RPGs around. Really refined. And at number 4 is Dark Souls 3. Probably a surprise to a lot of people. A lot of people might be expecting this game to be number 1 for me, being such a huge Souls guy. But this is the year where the Souls series has finally burnt me out a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love this game. I still think, despite being burnt out on the series now, for instance, I haven't even actually played the DLC for this game, but I've heard mixed things on it anyways. Now, I loved my time with this game, and I still think it's better than most of the games that came out this year, and I actually think it's still getting overlooked by a lot of people as far as, Game of the Year lists. I don't see this game making a lot of lists, so maybe people are as burnt out as I am with the series at this point, but, I mean, I had a great time with this game, playing with one of my buddies here on YouTube, 2222, going over to his place, and we just went through the entire game together, and it was a blast. I loved it from start to finish. The level design is some of the strongest it's been in the entire series. The lore is fascinating as always. The combat is entertaining as always. There's great build varieties in this game. Some of the bosses are fantastic. It's a really phenomenal Souls game. It's one of the best in the series in a lot of ways. It's super refined at this point. There are some disappointing things about it, just the amount of bonfires in it, and it doesn't have the interconnected world that Dark Souls, the original Dark Souls, had. This game is definitely far more linear, but I still really loved this game. I loved how fast-paced it was compared to previous ones. They definitely took a bit from Bloodborne in a lot of ways. So even though I was definitely burnt out and I actually not even really in the mood for playing the DLC, I can't deny that I had a great time playing this game, and I'm sure I'm going to come back to it over the years like I have with every other Souls game. Great multiplayer as well. It's just really fun playing these games co-op, and single player as well, of course. But yeah, it's only number 4 on the list. There are some games that I did enjoy more this year because they felt a little fresher. It's just, a really top-notch Souls game, but it's kind of more of the same in a lot of ways. Despite that, though, it's still one of the best games of the year. And at number 3 is Doom. Hands down the biggest surprise of the year. This game's making a lot of people's Game of the Year lists, and with good reason. It's one of the best first-person shooters of the past 10, 15 years. It's an incredible game. I loved this game. There's so many things to say about this game, but what I like about it is how fast-paced it is and how different it is from shooters that come out today. This has got health packs. No regenerating health here. You've got to constantly be on the move. You have a bunch of different weapons that you can equip. You're not holding just 2 weapons at once. The game looks great. I love the setting of this game. And the level design is some of the best in a first-person shooter in years. I love the focus on just keeping, staying on the move. I love a lot of the mechanics in this game as well. Basically the glory kill mechanic, where if you damage an enemy enough, and then you get up to them and do a melee attack, you'll get more ammo for your weapons that way, and some health as well. So you're incentivized to keep like attacking enemies and get in there, like really get in there. The way the chainsaw works in this game is fantastic as well. Basically, there's even some like actually well done platforming segments in this game. It's incredibly self-aware as well with its story. It doesn't bombard you with a bunch of fucking terrible cutscenes. And the way the Doom guy, your main character, reacts to a lot of the situations he finds himself in is hilarious. Like, this game is actually genuinely funny. It's got a killer soundtrack. I don't like the soundtrack as much as a lot of people do, but I still think it fits the game incredibly well. And it feels like it's such a great way to bring back a Doom into the modern era. There's so many smart design decisions in this game. The way the maps are laid out, where you'll be finding different patterns for running around the map, killing the different enemies. The game's super intense. It runs at 60 frames per second. It's always fast paced. It almost never slows down. The way the difficulty builds is fantastic. The boss battles, especially later in the game, are really a sight to behold. The story and the way it's presented, like I said before, is pretty hilarious. It's just a top-notch game. As far as design goes, there's really not too much wrong with it. It's even not too short either. It's got a good length to it as well. Now, of course, the multiplayer in the game is not very good. In fact, it's pretty bad, and the snap map is not as cool as it sounded on paper. A lot of the things people are doing with it are actually not that interesting. But the campaign in this game is so good, and it was such a surprise that it has to rank high for me. As someone that's, has kind of fallen off with first-person shooters, this game just came out of nowhere and reminded me of why I loved them so much in the first place. I really hope we get more games like this, that have this kind of play style, and really bring you back to like the glory days of first-person shooters. Fantastic game. And at number 2 is AM2R, another Metroid remake. A remake of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. And this is a fan game, and some people might say I'm cheating here by putting a fan game on this list, but fuck it. This is one of the best games I've played this year. This is incredible, and it sucks that, unfortunately, Nintendo kind of just put a stop to it. Now, of course, it's on the internet. You can find it as long as you're willing to like torrent it or things like that. And this game impressed the hell out of me. This is the best fan game I've ever seen, and I've been wary of them. I've played a lot of them, mostly Mega Man ones, and they're never good. You kind of play them and you understand, like, oh yeah, there's a reason why the Mega Man games are held in high regard. And a lot of people, just for me, they don't really understand what make those games special. The level design is always really lackluster in them. But this is kind of like a remake of Metroid 2, done in the style of like Metroid Zero Mission, and there are so many smart design decisions here, and from someone that hasn't played the original Metroid 2, it seems to have fixed all the complaints of that game that you could like level like at that game. I had so much fun with this, and it really reminded me of how much I enjoy this series, and this is one of the reasons why this series is starting to rank really high for me. This is just incredibly well done. It's so well done that I almost want to say that Nintendo themselves probably couldn't do a better job with it. It's absolutely impressive. The soundtrack is absolutely killer. The visuals, the way they've done up the visuals is just absolutely amazing. The only thing that really kind of holds it back a little bit are kind of like the Metroid fights, like you're seeing right here in the gameplay footage. They can be kind of a nuisance, but I'm not sure exactly how they could have ended up fixing them, because apparently they were just as bad in the original Game Boy version. But yeah, this is such a high quality product, and it blows my mind that such a small team did this. I think, in fact, it's mostly the work of one guy, from what I understand. So yeah, definitely try to get your hands on this. Definitely play it. It only takes a few hours. It doesn't take that long to go through, but it's easily some of the most fun I've had playing a game this year. It really kind of blew me away. It's very impressive. Definitely one of the highlights of 2016 for me. And at number 1, my favorite game of 2016, Salt and Sanctuary, a small little indie game on PS4 and PC. I think it's out on now. I think it might be coming out on Vita. I think Limited Run Games is actually doing a physical copy of this game at some point, so definitely be on the lookout for that, because this game's incredible. I love this game. This is the most fun I've had playing a game this year. There's a lot of reasons why I like this game. But the main one is how successfully it blends Souls elements with a 2D Metroidvania format. I thought it handled it so well. It's a beautiful fusion of the two. This game's got some different things going with it. It's very similar to Dark Souls 3 in a lot of ways. It obviously takes a huge influence with that game, with the way character builds work, honestly, even the way the combat feels a little bit. The way where you'll lose salt upon death and you gotta go get it back, and if you die again, you'll lose it for good. There's a lot of different elements like that. It's a very challenging game, like with the Souls games. It's got like the weight limit and things like that. It takes all these Souls elements and it melds them beautifully with like this 2D Metroidvania type feel it has. The way character builds work in this game is fascinating. The game's got like a Final Fantasy X style sphere grid for building your characters, which works amazingly. I was actually kind of surprised by how well that worked. But the game doesn't feel just like some Souls ripoff. It has its own things going for it that I think work really well. The whole sanctuary angle to the game is very interesting, where you find these sanctuaries and you can kind of bring different NPCs to each one that will kind of help your character in certain ways. There's local co-op that you can do as well. It doesn't have like a lot of the online stuff that the Souls games have, but it's still got some cool multiplayer stuff. You can leave messages, of course, for other players as well. The action in this game just feels really good. The bosses are quite well, are pretty well done. The game's got a great sense of atmosphere. I love the different variety of locations you'll find throughout the game. And it has that sense of exploration and discovery that the Souls games are so good at. This game even surprised me more than like Dark Souls 3 in that way. It gave me some of the same feelings I had when I played Dark Souls for the first time. That kind of feeling where you find like a new area that's so far off the beaten path, and you're not sure where you are, and you're kind of lost, but you're kind of having a lot of fun trying to explore this area. Like, there was one area I found like that was super hidden. I was just like, where the hell am I? I don't know where I'm going, and I'm like so far away from where I think I need to be. It's kind of like this feeling that some people probably wouldn't like, but for me, I love it. And the way you get new abilities in this game, and that you can kind of backtrack to previous areas and then like find new ones with your like Metroidvania type abilities. Like, there's a lot of cool traversal abilities in this game, like a double dash in the air, and a lot of other traversal abilities that make exploring the environments just a lot of fun. There's no map in the game. A lot of people were frustrated at that and thought that the game was harder to find your way around, being basically like a 2D game as opposed to like 3D games in the Souls 3D environments in the Souls games, but I didn't find that. I actually liked the fact that there wasn't a map in this game. Yeah, I played through this game multiple times. I got the Platinum for it, which I only ever do that is if I really love the game. The game has to really impress me for me to want to do that, and I went and did it for this game. And like with Souls games, it's a game I'm going to keep coming back to. I tried multiple builds, I did multiple playthroughs, so it's got the replay value of the Souls games in that sense. And yeah, this makes number 1 as opposed to Dark Souls 3 because this felt fresh to me. It didn't just feel like another Dark Souls game. This game had was basically combined those elements with some the Metroidvania format and some of its ideas of its own, and it felt unique to me. And it's one of the best indie games I've played. And yeah, another kind of overlooked game that came out this year. I don't hear too many people talking about it. It's cheap too. It's not like an expensive game. It's only like a $20 game. It's not, a full-priced game or anything like that. So yeah, if you're a big fan of the Souls games, definitely check this out. I think you'll be very surprised by this game and the quality, how high quality it is. The developer of this, I was not too familiar with their previous games, so I really didn't know what to expect from this game. All I heard was that it was, very inspired by Souls, but I really didn't expect this game to come out the way it did. I was really expecting just like a half-assed Souls clone, and it's not that at all. Definitely my favorite game of 2016. Okay, guys, so that's my top 10. Now I'm going to talk about some honorable mentions and some other games. So this section of the video might go on a long time, but I figured there's a lot of games that came out this year. The year as a whole, I gotta say, there's a lot of games I played that were pretty disappointing and even bad to me, and I'm gonna cover those in a later video. I'm gonna actually do a top 5 worst disappointing games, because yeah, this is that kind of year. But I really actually don't think this year is as terrible for video games as a lot of people have been saying. I mean, I had enough games to do a top 10. I probably could have done like a top 15, to be honest. So really, actually, this year was actually pretty good for video games. Now, next year looks much better, but that's next year. But anyways, some honorable mentions here. So games that were close to making the list, but just didn't quite cut it. I was actually going to include remasters. Usually I don't include those types of games, but this year I was going to make an exception. I mean, as you saw, another Metroid remake was on my list, but Gravity Rush Remastered came out this year. My first time playing that game. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was definitely a good game. I'm looking forward to the sequel coming out soon. Hyper Light Drifter is a fantastic 2D Zelda-type game that's really heavy on atmosphere. It's got one of the best soundtracks of the year. One of my big issues with that game was the 30 FPS. It really made that game feel slower than it should. But they patched in a 60 FPS mode on PC at least, so that game probably plays a lot better now. I didn't get to go back to it. I didn't have enough time to do that. But if I did, that game might have actually sneaked in on the list towards the bottom, because there's a lot to like about that game. I still think it's one of the more notable games of this year, especially as far as indie games go. Ratchet and Clank, the Ratchet and Clank reboot that they did this year was really good. It was really enjoyable. It was quite fun. I would like to go back to the very first game to see kind of the differences between the two, because I think like the writing and humor was supposed to be much better in the original game compared to the remake. But I really enjoyed that. It's the type of game you don't see too often these days. Bravely Second was, I think, actually a top-notch sequel to the first one, which had a lot of issues with pacing, especially later in the game. Bravely Second fixed all that. It still got the excellent job system. That was close. That was definitely close to making my list, but not quite. Grand Kingdom was actually a pretty underrated game this year, like this just cool little strategy game on Vita and PS4. Not a lot of people played that. That game just came and went. Like I never hear anybody talking about that game, but it's actually quite good. It's surprisingly good. Definitely, it's probably going to drop in price super quick. It probably already has. So definitely give that game a chance if you're into like weird, off-kilter strategy games, strategy RPGs, I should say. Zero Time Dilemma. I'm going to talk about this game a bit in another video, but it's still a good game. I'll just say it was a disappointing game to me in a lot of ways, but I still think it was a memorable experience for me. There's a lot of crazy shit in that game. I don't think it's near as good as 999 or especially Virtue's Last Reward, but it was still memorable enough to be an honorable mention for me. It was definitely not a bad game or anything like that. Deus Ex Mankind Divided I really enjoyed. It's one of those stealth games I just have a hard time playing stealthy, so I just played guns blazing. But I thought that game was actually fairly enjoyable. It probably would have been super low on like a top 20, but it was still good enough to be like an honorable mention, basically. Super Hot was actually this cool little indie game on PC. Really creative concept. A lot of cool like story, like way they build the story in that game, like the whole computer type aspect to it. Really unique gameplay. It's like a puzzle first-person shooter, basically. It was a fairly brief experience. I know a lot of people have that game ranked high on their list. Like I don't know. For me, I wish there was a little more to it. I mean, it's really well polished and it's like tightly designed, but I don't know. I felt like there's just something missing with that game. I don't know. I feel like that's a game that you can build off that idea in some really cool ways. But yeah, it was definitely enjoyable, a really cool game, enough to be an honorable mention. The Last Guardian, some people might be expecting that game to have made my list, because I was actually pleasantly surprised by that game, but I think I'm letting the ending cloud my judgment of that game. Like, the ending is super emotional and really well done, but that game, I can't deny that it's just not a fun game to play. Most of the time playing through that game, I was either bored or frustrated. So it has a lot of great emotionally resonant moments, but I don't think that's enough to carry the game into my top 10 list. That said, I did like the game overall. I didn't hate it like a lot of people have, and I do think it's one of the more memorable games of 2016. So those are all the honorable mentions. Let's move on to games I missed that I think I would have really liked, or games I just missed in general. And there's quite a few. This year, I've been pretty busy, so there was a lot of games I missed, unfortunately. Um, so Oxenfree was kind of like a 2D story-driven game with like some teenagers, and it's kind of like a horror game. Apparently, that game's really good, and it's got like really strong storytelling. Unfortunately, I just didn't have the time to get to it. I'm gonna try to play that at some point, though. It does seem like my type of game. XCOM 2, I bought this game. I still have it on PS4. I just haven't played it. I loved the original, not the original XCOM, but Enemy Unknown on PS3 and Xbox 360, PC as well. XCOM 2, there's some things about it that sound a little irksome, like the time limit to missions. That might make me like hate the game, honestly, because I hate time limits in games. But I don't know. Maybe that game would have made my top 10. I don't know. I haven't played it, but it looks good. I really enjoyed Enemy Unknown. The Division is a game that I know a lot of people, some of my friends here on YouTube really loved it. I played the beta and enjoyed it, but not really enough to want to go out and buy the full game. It's really cheap now, though, so I would like to play it at some point. It wouldn't have made my Game of the Year list. I highly doubt it, but still, I did miss it. Hitman is the big game for me, though. Now, they are doing a physical copy of it in January, and I'm definitely going to play that. But I think out of all the games here that I missed, that's the one I feel like I would have enjoyed the most. Apparently, it's like this great return to form for the series. And Blood Money was like one of my favorite. It is my favorite stealth game. So to hear the game is actually just as good, if not better than that, is really crazy to me. And I really want to play that game. That game, if I enjoyed that game as much as most people have, that game would have probably made my list and maybe have been like number one. That game looks really good. I can't wait to actually play that. Quantum Break, I don't think I would like this game, honestly, the more I look at it. I don't know, the way they blend TV show with game is just, honestly, it's kind of an original idea, but it just seems like it fails spectacularly. And I don't know, the gameplay just does not look all that enjoyable to me. I still would kind of like to play it, but the PC version is way too expensive at this point, so I'm gonna really wait. I'm gonna wait for a long time to play that one. I usually like Remedy's games, but something about that game just doesn't quite. I don't know. I've heard a lot of mixed to negative things about it, so I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that one so much. Odin Sphere Left Thruster. A lot of people loved this game. It looks like to be like one of the best remakes ever. They made a game which I hear a lot of people say is honestly kind of shitty. They made it amazing, and I played the demo. I loved the demo. I thought it was a ton of fun. This is another big game, like with Hitman, that would have probably made my Game of the Year list if I had played it. Unfortunately, didn't have the time for it, really. I do definitely got to pick that game up at some point. Mirror's Edge Catalyst, I would have liked to have played. I kind of liked the Mirror's Edge. I didn't love it, but I did like it. So Catalyst, I would like to try. The open world format of that game didn't seem to do it any favors from what I've heard, though, so there's a good chance I wouldn't have liked that. There's a game called Fury. It's kind of like this indie game. It was on PS Plus for whatever reason. I still didn't end up playing it, though. I've heard a lot of notable YouTubers love that game, like Matthew Matosis, Joseph Anderson. Apparently, it's just like this really awesome skill-based Devil May Cry hack and slash type game that's just all bosses, basically. I don't know if I would like it. It might be a little too much for me, but I've heard such great things about it. I have heard the soundtrack, though. The soundtrack is incredible in that game. So yeah, I did miss out on that. Seventh Dragon 3 Code VFD I missed out on. Awesome Stuff HD here on YouTube. That was his favorite game of the year. He thought that was like this amazing JRPG, and hearing him talk about it, I would like to play it. Maybe I would like that game, even though I played the demo and wasn't that impressed with it, but maybe the full game is much better. Monster Hunter Generations, I'm a huge Monster Hunter fan, but I like to basically play every other entry, and I feel like Monster Hunter 4 just came out. I put so many hours into that. I wasn't quite ready to jump into a whole new Monster Hunter game already. I really want that series back on console, man. I really prefer that series on console. Hopefully we get a Switch version at some point. Like, that would be fucking awesome. Legend of Heroes Cold Steel 2. This was Leo the Fun Eater's Game of the Year. The way he talks about it is just so, like, the enthusiasm is so infectious. I played the first game this year, wasn't that impressed with it. Like, it was okay, but apparently this game is much, much better. So I still need the time. I need time to get back to it, but I wasn't feeling like a whole other Legend of Heroes game immediately after Cold Steel. This year, I'm going to try to get to Cold Steel 2, though, and based on what everyone's saying about it, it would have probably had a good chance to make my Game of the Year list, rather. Recore, I've always heard these Jet Force Gemini comparisons with that game, and it looks pretty good from a gameplay standpoint, but apparently the ending is a mess, and it just becomes this incredibly tedious fetch quest at the end, and apparently it's super rushed and super glitchy. That game, I'll definitely wait till it's like dirt cheap to play. I don't imagine that would have made my Game of the Year list, unless it was like some super underrated game that I feel like people unfairly shit on, but I don't think that's the case. Thumper is another game I really wish I played. It's like this super fast-paced rhythm game. It's super challenging from what I understand. Really crazy visuals and like percussion-based music that's in that game. It seems right up my alley. I really like rhythm games, especially super challenging ones. So that's another game that actually had a very real potential to make my top 10, and I just unfortunately didn't have the time to get to it this year. Exist Archive from Tri-Ace is kind of like this Valkyrie profile successor. That game, I've heard negative things. Apparently it's just not very good. Apparently it's super like repetitive, and just the way it's done, it's super grindy apparently, and just it's like a 50-hour game that should have been like 20. So I'm probably not going to play that one. World of Final Fantasy, I heard was quite good. I enjoyed the demo quite a bit, and honestly, I think I'd probably like that game more than Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, it actually looks pretty fun, that game. I enjoyed the battle system quite a bit from what I played. It's nice, like a nice throwback to like classic Final Fantasy in a lot of ways. Tyranny from Obsidian Games, I really would have liked to have played this year. It looks like basically a Pillars of Eternity, but you're playing as like the bad guys. It's a computer, old school kind of computer RPG. And Pillars of Eternity was one of my favorite games of last year. It made my top 10, so I would no doubt love Tyranny. It's a long game. I didn't have the time for it, unfortunately, this year. A good chance that would have made my top 10. Dishonored 2, I still need to play the original Dishonored, but if I do enjoy that game, I'm definitely going to get around to Dishonored 2. Pokemon Sun and Moon, I'm actually playing right now. I'm enjoying the game. At first I didn't, but the more I play it, the more I'm getting into it, and it's actually pretty addictive. It wouldn't have made my top 10 anyways, but I still think it's actually a pretty great game. Definitely good enough to be like an honorable mention. Dead Rising 4, the more I look at that game, the more I think I would hate it. It removes the timer, and it doesn't have what I like about the Dead Rising series. That series, that's a whole new video I could do on that series, but the decline of that series is just really depressing to see, honestly. Forza Horizon 3, honestly, I'm not big into racing games, but that game looks actually pretty good. I think I would actually enjoy that game, and it's been a while since I've played like a good racing game, so I don't know if that is cheap enough on PC. I think I might give that a go. And then finally, No Man's Sky, which I can guarantee I would hate that game. I mean, a lot of people have already talked about that game, and the disappointment that game is for a lot of people. I'd recommend watching Joseph Anderson's amazing video on it. It's this hilarious, complete, like, savage beatdown against that game and why it's horrible. And yeah, watching that video, man, that game is rough. Like, it seems pretty bad, and it's just not my type of game. Like the open world, like Minecraft type survival. Like, it's basically Minecraft in space, kind of. Well, now, because they've added like building elements. Originally, it was just that like tedious resource gathering game. It's almost not even a game. But whatever. No Man's Sky. That's a whole topic. People have endlessly talked about that game. But that will lead me to the final kind of discussion for this video. Games that are well loved that just aren't for me. That I pretty much missed out on, or I actually ended up playing. Street Fighter V, I'm just not into fighting games, but apparently that game's pretty good, and they improved it quite a bit. There is actually a story mode in there now, from what I understand at least, but it's just not my type of genre, really. Stardew Valley, I actually did end up buying this game. Unfortunately, I played it long enough to not be able to refund it on Steam, but yeah, that game, I don't get it. I don't understand why people like it. I don't know, it just seems like work to me, that game. Everything you do in that game is just a chore. It's not fun at all. The only part of it I liked was like the characters, and like getting to spend time with the characters and getting to understand like their what they like and things like that. Like almost kind of like the dating elements to it, I didn't mind. It's the rest of it, like the mining and then the resource gathering, the farming. Like it's super dull and just tedious, like busy work that I just did not enjoy. I love the visuals to that game. I love the soundtrack. I love the kind of relaxing mood it has, but it's just not a fun game to play for me. I really regret buying it, honestly, but I know a lot of people love it. It's like number 1 on a lot of people's Game of the Year lists. It just didn't gel with me. Not my type of game. Uncharted 4. I again, I've talked about Uncharted so many times, but Uncharted 4 is one of those games where I don't understand it. I don't understand where the praise comes from. Like that is a thoroughly mediocre game in my opinion. It's got just it's kind of like well, not generic, but average gunplay, climbing sections that go on for way too long and require like no player input, like hardly any player input whatsoever. There's no stakes to the climbing at all. It's mind-numbingly boring. The pacing in that game is horrendous. The story is nowhere near as good as people think it is. The writing, it's maybe a step up for Uncharted, but it's still not that great, especially compared to like The Last of Us. If you compare like the writing and like the storytelling, like from The Last of Us and Uncharted 4, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's honestly kind of shocking that it's actually the same guy that wrote both of those games. I hated the whole epilogue sequence of Uncharted 4. The set pieces were, okay, but I still have a bunch of problems with the set pieces in these games. The general shooting is just not that great in Uncharted 4. Like, I cannot believe how, like, the lack of improvement with these Uncharted games as far as their actual gunplay goes. It's absolutely baffling to me. Again, it's just one of those games that's just, like, presentation, like, visuals over everything else, and it's just, I don't know, I don't get it. I played through that game. It's not a horrendous game or anything. It's not a bad game, but I like to call it one of the best games of the year. It's just I don't get it. I don't think it's near like one of the best games of the year. And it's like this game and Overwatch are the games that people constantly say are like the number 1 game of the year, and I don't understand it. I don't think I ever will. But yeah, Uncharted 4, Overwatch, which brings me to Overwatch. I can't get into it. I've tried. I've played with friends. I've played with random people, and it's just not for me. It's incredibly polished for what it is. I mean, it's basically like Team Fortress 3, really. But I mean, it's got a great cast of characters. They're all like the balancing in that game is pretty good. The whole loot box element too, though, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what's so exciting about that stuff. Like every time you open a loot box, it's like, ooh, I got a spray. Ooh, I got a voice pack thing. Like, who cares? Like, I don't know, incredibly polished for what it is. It's Blizzard doing what they've always been doing. Taking an existing concept, existing type of game, and just really polishing it to a mere sheen. But not for me. Competitive first-person shooters, not for me generally. What I am surprised about Overwatch is, though, a lot of people that are like me that aren't into competitive multiplayer first-person shooters really liked Overwatch. So I thought maybe I would too, but nope. I played it. I played it actually a decent amount, and it's never enjoyed me. I've never had fun playing it. But unlike Uncharted 4, I actually do kind of understand where the praise comes from Overwatch. It's one of those games where I do understand why people love it so much, and it's got a crazy like following behind it. But just not for me. Another game is Inside. A lot of people think that's one of the best games of the year, like one of the best indie games. From all like the reviews I've seen, Joseph Anderson's review in particular, it seems to have all the problems Limbo does, which is like these insanely like crazy trial and error based puzzles, and then it's barely got a story, and then it's basically like this like shock value ending that just is, I don't know, like just completely out there. And I guess for some people they really like it, but for me, I don't know. If I had played Inside, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have liked it. Like that's another game that I think if I played it, based on just Joseph Anderson's review, I probably wouldn't understand where all the praise comes from. Like, as far as gameplay goes, it's got the same problems as Limbo. It's just the way the puzzles are designed in that game are just unfair trial and error. Like, it's just bullshit. Starbound's another game that's basically it reminds me of Terraria or Minecraft, but it's got like a space kind of thing going on. It's basically what No Man's Sky wanted to be. This is like Starbound's like a 2D version of that, and it succeeds in a lot more areas. And I can understand why people would enjoy Starbound as well, but for me, it just felt like a chore. Like with Stardew Valley, it's just like those craft like games, like resource management crafting games, like survival games like this. They've never done anything for me, and Starbound is no exception. But as far as those games go, it's probably one of the best ones that you can get. The Witness is one of those games that a lot of people loved. I highly doubt I would enjoy it. Just like 40 hours of maze puzzles, not for me. But there are some cool moments to that game. I've heard some of the puzzles, some of the things people like the discovery type moments people figure out in that game are actually really neat. Like there's some really neat puzzles in that game, and that game looks amazing. But actually playing it, I don't know. I don't think I would enjoy it, but don't have anything against that game personally. I think for some people, I think they would really love it. And it seems like a cool game especially for puzzle fanatics. But for me, nah. Dragon Quest VII, a lot of people loved. I've talked about Dragon Quest before, just not my series. It's, I don't know, a little too traditional for my tastes. I've never really liked the battle system all that much in those games. And that's like a 100-hour RPG that I don't know, it'd be 100 hours of boredom for me, probably. Firewatch is another game that the more I look at it, I probably wouldn't like it. It seems to have a lot of story issues, but yeah, a lot of people loved it. I've watched like a whole playthrough of it. It seems rough in a lot of ways. I don't know. That game's, I don't know. I don't think I would enjoy it all that much. Darkest Dungeon is a cool game in a lot of ways. I love the aesthetic that it has. I love the atmosphere that it has. Like the narrator that it has is amazing. Like the soundtrack. But apparently that game becomes like a tedious grind towards the end. And unfortunately, that kind of puts me off of it. It is still a game I'd like to try at some point, though. I feel like I'm going to play that game eventually, and maybe I'll like it more than I think I will, but it seems like a crazy grind, and there's a lot of design decisions in that game, especially later in the game. Again, based off Joseph Anderson's video, yeah, I'm praising Joseph Anderson a lot, but seriously, that guy has an amazing YouTube channel that people need to check out. But yeah, the Darkest Dungeon has a lot of design elements to it that are just very off-putting to me. So I'm not sure I'll ever play it, but there's a lot of strengths that game has, for sure. Dragon Quest Builders, I played the demo, not for me at all, but it's definitely like a better version of Minecraft with more story going on with it. Gears of War 4, I've heard decent things about that game. It looks like kind of more of the same to me as far as like Gears games go. But maybe it would be something I would pick up cheap to play co-op with someone, but it doesn't look that good to me. And finally, Owlboy, which I was excited for, but the more I've heard about this game, it seems like it's just okay, especially as far as gameplay goes. Apparently, like the story is really well done in that game, but gameplay, it just seems kind of, I don't know, kind of just blah, like just. You know, it's got kind of an interesting mechanic with carrying characters where they can, like, shoot, basically. Like, that's how you're shooting and doing any kind of actions is picking up characters because your character can't actually do anything. But apparently they just don't do a whole lot with that concept, at least not as much as they should have. So, yeah, I've heard kind of mixed things on that game. But I still would like to play it at some point, I think. Maybe it would surprise me in a lot of ways. But, yeah, that's it, guys. Yeah, this video has gone on way longer, but I wanted to talk about like the year of 2016 in general with all the different games and talk about the games I missed. I kind of give a lot of games more recognition. Maybe some of these games you hadn't heard of before, and you'd like to go check them out. I didn't just want to do a simple top 10 list because I thought that would be kind of a bit boring. So I wanted to basically have this video be just like a 2016 in gaming kind of video in general. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. The next video I'll do is the top 5 disappointing worst, which usually I don't do these videos, but this year is a special case, and I think I have there's enough games that came out where I can actually do a video like that. But what are some of your guys' favorite games of the year? What games maybe disappointed you? And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.